The harsh fluorescent lights inside Maddox's son's auto faded twice before plunging the shop into shadow at precisely 7:19 p.m. on November 8, 2019. Silas Maddox, 33, still had traces of oil beneath his nails after a marathon alternator replacement that had eaten up his afternoon. He locked the door with a heavy iron key, a family heirloom, once wielded by his father, when the shop bore a different, more hopeful name. Outside, the November air in Grantham, Michigan, had a sharp edge, the kind that gnaws at bones and makes you tug your old denim jacket closer around your chest, even though true winter was weeks off. Silas did just that, stepping out onto the cracked concrete parking lot towards his battered Chevy Silverado, its paint faded from too many Midwestern freezes and spring thaws. A rusted security camera perched above the entrance caught his silhouette, breath fogging the air, as he paused briefly by his truck, keys dangling loosely in his grip. For a moment, his posture tensed, a watchfulness at odds with the relief of a long day done. His free hand dipped into a pocket, pulling out a scratched phone whose glow briefly lit the worry lines on his face. 4 seconds. Then the phone was tucked away. A brief, silent ritual that would become suddenly meaningful. The security footage would later clock this moment at 19:23, the last confirmed sight of Silas Maddox alive. His Silverado would stay right there all night, unmoved. Across town, Nora Maddox, Silas's younger sister, called him 19 times between 8 p.m. and midnight, every call flipping to voicemail after 2 hollow rings. Over and over, the automated voice told her the subscriber was unavailable, the words growing more ominous with each attempt. By 1 in the morning, Nora was parked in her hatchback outside the auto shop, staring at the lonely pickup through blurry eyes, headlights splintered into soft gold halos. No one knew Silas like she did. They'd survived under the same leaky roof on 4th Street, had seen their dad drink himself to silence, and together had stepped in to raise Silas's 6-year-old daughter after her mother disappeared into the haze of methadone clinics. Silas wouldn't just go, Nora murmured to herself, voice tight and raw. Not from his girl, not from her. When the Grantham police finally arrived just before 3 a.m., the response was perfunctory, almost weary. Officer Leland chewed on a pen as Nora explained about Silas's missing wallet. His phone, too, was gone, but his truck stayed locked, untouched, with his work jacket folded on the seat, stubbornly refusing to fit into any easy narrative of a man running away. "Young men leave sometimes," Officer Leland muttered, not even bothering to conceal his doubt. "Especially if there's money trouble." Nora's hands shook as she thrust recent bank statements forward. An inexplicable 9,200 withdrawal just days earlier. Money Silas had said was for his daughter's future. Money he'd pinched and saved for 3 years. "Means nothing," Leland said flatly, but he agreed finally to file the report. Inside Maddox Sons, everything was neat. Humdrum. Tools lined the corkboard in precise order. The register held $64 and a handful of change. The hydraulic lift was down. No signs of struggle, nothing overturned, not a drop of blood, except one minor anomaly. The rear exit, which Silas always secured from the inside, was left unlocked, the door nudged by the wind. Detective Alma Reyes started her canvass just after sunrise, her notebook steady in gloved hands, her eyes missing nothing. In towns like Grantham, big crimes rippled through the streets for a generation. Old-timers watched from behind lace curtains. Kids on BMX bikes circled closer than was wise. While Reyes reflected on prints in the oil-smudged dust and the open rear door, Nora Maddox sat at her kitchen table, coffee cooling, a laptop open to a freshly made Facebook group. Help find Silas Maddox. By noon, the first post was already gathering momentum. A snapshot of Silas mid-laugh, his daughter Ivy perched on his shoulders at the Grantham Summer Fair, the Ferris wheel spinning behind them. Within 2 days, local and regional shares stacked up. Silas's face, a man who'd once seemed ordinary, appeared on thousands of screens from Flint to Muskegon. Underneath that face, people saw a story of quiet endurance, the weight of single parenthood, and years of blue-collar struggle etched around his eyes. The volunteer search started at dawn on Saturday. Dozens of people met in Chapman's grocery lot, steam pluming from their mugs into the cold air. Nora handed out handbills, each yellow page an invocation, a plea. They broke into teams, crossing frozen railroad tracks, venturing into graffiti-laced warehouses. Some searched the tangled shoreline of Lake Maddox, where the reeds rattled with leftover ice. Others swept alleys off Main Street, flashlights flickering in the abandoned bus depot. They even checked under the old Riverview Bridge, whispering Silas's name into the fog, despite knowing, deep down, these searches almost never ended with a joyful reunion. Still, there was hope. Nora clung to it fiercely, even as another night fell. Detective Reyes took command by Monday. She was a methodical investigator, with a reputation for relentless attention to detail. She personally collected every scrap of footage from corner stores, auto parts shops, and diners' hours of jumping grain, headlights arcing along empty roads. One video from a liquor store across the street provided the only anomaly. At 11:45 p.m., a dark sedan, maybe a late-model Lincoln, passed Maddox Sons, so slow its shape blurred. The car paused, brake lights flared, then it rolled away into the night. No plate could be made out. The camera was too old, too cheap. 3 days after Silas vanished, municipal workers clearing a gutter on Fordham Avenue pried free a shattered phone from the storm drain. The device was beyond standard repair. Battery punctured and screen obliterated. Someone had gone to lengths to destroy it. But Detective Reyes's tech support managed, through patience and luck, to extract a handful of call logs and corrupted text data. 43 calls from a blocked line in the last month, plus fragments of conversations that trailed off mid-message. The content was gone. Only the skeletons remained. When banking records arrived, the puzzle twisted. That $9,000 withdrawal was only the visible part. In the months before he vanished, Silas had been regularly depositing sums just below federal reporting limits, almost $22,000 total. Too much for a small-town mechanic living paycheck to paycheck. Attempts to reconstruct Silas's last days turned up more contradiction. Nora swore her brother was no criminal, just a desperate father struggling to keep Ivy's future bright. He sacrificed everything for her, she insisted to Reyes. Anything sketchy? Never. But money is stubborn. Reyes knew all too well that desperation could drive good people to reckless places. Neighboring businesses and residents added confusion. Mr. Lowry, who lived in the faded trailer across from the shop, claimed that around 8 p.m. he'd heard voices, one of them unmistakably Silas's arguing with a man outside. He sounded scared. Not mad. Scared, Lowry remembered. On the other hand, Janine Ross, whose apartment window looked down over the shop's lot, said the night was unremarkable. Nothing but traffic and the soft patter of rain against glass. Then there was Oakley, an itinerant man, who often slept in a makeshift camp near the loading dock. He claimed to have seen, just after midnight, someone lugging what looked like a carpet roll out the shop's back exit, loading it stiffly into a nondescript white van. But Oakley's account changed each time Reyes pressed for details. Sometimes it was 2 people, sometimes 1. Sometimes the object was a carpet, other times a tarp or big bag. The whiskey on Oakley's breath didn't help. Despite the inconsistencies, Reyes filed every statement carefully. She refused to let even impossible details slip through the cracks. By midweek, The investigation widened. Detective Reyes dug deep, requesting transaction histories, reaching out to Silas's old friends, interviewing every business in a 5-block radius. She sifted through hours of street-side security video, headphones clamped tight as the statusy images flickered past. One video from a bodega 2 blocks west captured an odd sight. Close to midnight, a tall woman in a tailored wool coat, hair cut short, walked briskly past the entrance and paused under the dim streetlight. She checked her phone repeatedly, glancing at Maddox's sons as if steeling herself. After a minute, she turned sharply and disappeared into the darkness. Reyes circled her in the footage over and over, her own notes sprawling with questions. Who was this woman? Why did she seem so out of place, dressed for a business dinner, among shuttered mechanics and pawnshops? Financially, red flags popped up everywhere. Along with the unexplained cash, there were years-old debts credit cards maxed, overdue notices, microloans lost in the shuffle. But there was also a second pattern: protection payments, small sums every other Friday, traceable to a handful of other small businesses across Grantham. Nora had no answer for this. Dad used to say, money runs downhill, but Silas never. He hated owing anyone. He wouldn't get himself mixed up with criminals. Reyes listened, but made no promises. Patterns like these had marked other unsolved disappearances, especially among business owners who found themselves squeezed from both sides. Forensic teams examined Maddox's sons again. This time, they found something: a thin, reddish streak on the inside wall near the back door, half washed with bleach, but still visible under crime scene lights. Lab analysis confirmed it was Silas's blood, but the amount pointed to a superficial wound, maybe a split knuckle or scraped palm. Yet someone had tried to sanitize it, with urgency. While the days bled into each other, Nora's appeal spread wider, from local Facebook pages to true crime forums and missing persons networks. Ivy, too young to truly grasp what was happening, began asking questions. Why isn't Daddy coming home? That Nora could hardly bear to answer. The house grew quieter. Friends brought casseroles, searched behind the supermarket, knocked on doors. But as the first frost of December crept in, hope felt brittle. Detective Reyes, pressured by her chief to show progress, doubled down. She pored through phone records, both Silas's and those of numbers pinged in the area that night. One disposable phone, registered to no one, had arrived near the shop at 7:45 p.m., left just after 10, and never pinged again. Its last location, the abandoned foundry on Oak Street, a favorite dumping ground for stolen cars, trash, and secrets. No one wanted to speculate out loud, but everyone felt it. Something very bad had happened in that little shop. Weeks turned to months. A hard winter descended on Grantham, and the hunt for Silas grew colder, both literally and figuratively. The town's attention moved on, as it always does, replaced by fresh headlines and new crises. Yet Detective Reyes and Nora Maddox refused to let the trail die. At the start of January, Reyes received a breakthrough. Forensics had finally managed to isolate a partial DNA profile from skin cells under the small traces of Silas's blood by the rear exit, a mix that didn't belong to him. The profile was run through CODIS, but yielded no matches. Still, it was proof. Someone else had been close enough to have physical contact and to try cleaning up after. Meanwhile, Nora followed up on every rumor sightings of someone who looked like Silas at a truck stop in Kalamazoo, a whispered story about a fight in a bar in rural Indiana. Nothing ever panned out. Ivy began sleeping with Silas's old work jacket draped across her bed. Nora drove past the shop at night, sometimes parking out front with the engine idling and headlights off just to will an answer to appear. One evening, Reyes got a call from a hardware store owner, Mr. Daly, who had finally checked his own security video. On the night Silas vanished, his cameras captured the dark sedan from the earlier footage driving down Main, but more importantly, they caught the tailored coat woman leaving Maddox Sons at exactly 8:13 p.m. She walked briskly, head down, sliding something, perhaps keys or a phone, into her pocket. Reyes brought Janine Ross, the apartment resident, in for another interview. This time, under pointed questions, Janine hesitated, then admitted she'd heard the sound of a woman's voice in the stairwell late that night, muffled, urgent, angry. Afterward, she'd dismissed it as neighbor drama. Now she wasn't sure. The investigation intensified. Reyes mapped every traceable phone near the auto shop during the critical 2-hour window. The disposable number, tracked through cell tower pings and burner phone purchase records at a party store in downtown Grantham, finally yielded a fuzzy image. The woman in the coat, hair tied back, hat low over her eyes, paying cash. A wave of guilt swept the town. People realized how quickly they moved on, leaving Nora and Ivy in the echoing silence of not knowing. Nora, steely but exhausted, kept organizing vigils on the edge of the empty lot, candles flickering in the wind, the scent of melting wax mingling with oil and rust. Ivy stood beside her, clutching a photo of her father as the crowd shrank and winter deepened. By February, a rhythm set in. Nora's unwavering hope, Reyes's relentless investigation, and a community being forced to ask if evil might live right under their noses. Questions about the woman with no name, the unseen debts, and the silent town haunted everyone. Then, as the first thaw arrived, something truly shocking surfaced that would finally shift the case. A demolition crew, clearing out the ruined Oak Street foundry, uncovered something wedged deep beneath the collapsed floor, a heavy, rusted barrel, sealed tight, hidden from notice for years. The news spread fast. By dusk, Grantham's police tape looped around the old foundry, yellow and stark against skeletal timbers. Detective Reyes arrived with the county forensic team and a local medical examiner. She watched as workers carefully winched the barrel from the dirt, grunting as the lid resisted, finally giving with a metallic shriek. Inside, plastic sheeting, layers half melted into a chemical scar. What lay beneath, what emerged under cold white lights, was, heartbreakingly, a human form. Burned, compressed, and hidden for years, it would take science to tell whether this was truly Silas Maddox. Reyes's throat felt tight as she collected evidence. A worn wristwatch, a belt buckle with a carved S in meticulous photographs, fragments of cloth so faded the original colors were lost. The scene was silent except for the camera clicks and the distant sigh of wind through broken windows. While forensic experts transported the remains, the town's mood shifted. After so many months locked in quiet dread, the hangings of hope and closure tangled together, too frail to separate. Nora recognized the watch as soon as Reyes showed her the photograph. She crumpled into herself, grief and relief mingled in her tears. At last, the agony of uncertainty had ended, even if the pain of the truth remained. Dental and DNA analysis were conclusive. It was Silas. He had died by a blow to the back of the head, a single, efficient, devastating strike. Toxicology found nothing. There was no evidence of drugs, only violence and careful concealment. The revelation reignited the investigation. Reyes returned to every thread, this time with the scrutiny that only a murder victim receives, interrogations that stretched into the night, requests for federal assistance, even a regional media story airing theories about local corruption, extortion, and the mysterious businesswoman seen on the shop's cameras. The disposable phone, the one lost in the storm drain, was reanalyzed using updated techniques, yielding a fragment of a deleted text from Silas. Can't keep this up. Going to tell. And nothing more. It hinted at a threat, a breaking point, a hidden narrative more labyrinthine than anyone had guessed. Townsfolk whispered about who might want Silas quiet, and why. The Maddox family's ties ran deep through Grantham, but so did old resentments and secrets. Ivy, old enough to remember but not comprehend, clung to her father's photograph, her questions hardening into truths nobody wanted to say aloud. Then, 3 weeks later, Detective Reyes received the call that changed everything. The partial DNA found at the scene had a familial match in a state crime database, belonging not to a stranger, but to someone with authority in Grantham itself. And for the first time, the scope of Silas Maddox's disappearance, his murder, emerged as something far more sinister than anyone had feared. Detective Reyes's pulse raced as she scrolled through the lab report. The partial DNA from the crime scene, found under Silas's nails and on a half-burned thread within the barrel's plastic sheeting, matched that of Deputy Chief Carla Dent, the highest-ranking officer in Grantham. The confirmation came not from a criminal arrest, but through an old, voluntary family genetics sample Dent had submitted years before during a campaign for community engagement. Reyes summoned Dent to the station under the pretense of follow-up questions. As they sat across the desk, the room seemed to shrink. Dent, usually affable and confident, answered smoothly. Too smoothly for someone uninvolved. Her alibi for the night Silas vanished was a late-night strategy meeting with the mayor, but records showed she left City Hall hours before she claimed. The department pool car she signed out was a dark Lincoln sedan, matching the one captured on security footage. Piece by piece, Reyes rebuilt a timeline. Bank records revealed that Dent had received regular, small cash deposits, always under reporting limits, over the past 2 years. And her personal business had indirect ties to Grantham's small network protection payments. The professionals who'd described a woman in a business coat, the financial trail, the strange silence around the station when Dent's name was mentioned on the internal tip line. It all pointed inward. With mounting evidence, Reyes confronted Dent with the DNA results behind closed doors. Silence stretched until Dent exhaled sharply, a tiny, involuntary crack in her mask. "There are things you don't understand," she said, voice dropped to a whisper. "None of this was supposed to go that far. He wanted out, threatened to turn everyone in. I tried to calm him, tried to. But then..." Reyes pressed for details, but Dent only shook her head, voice growing colder. She invoked her rights, demanded a lawyer. The wheels of justice ground painfully, but steadily, forward. News of Dent's arrest rocked Grantham to its core. Shock waves rippled through the police force, through city council, through the walls of every struggling small business that had paid or resisted protection. Nora Maddox received the call at home first disbelief, then a wave of numb relief, knowing at last what had happened, even if it couldn't bring Silas back. The months that followed were a blur of headlines and public confrontation. Carla Dent charged with murder, extortion, conspiracy, evidence tampering. Testimonies revealed she ran a protection racket, targeting local businesses, her badge and authority silencing witnesses, covering up threats and violence. Silas, initially a reluctant participant, took his cut to cover Ivy's future. But when he wanted to walk away, Dent saw him as too great a liability. Under pressure, Dent struck a plea deal, giving up the names of 2 lower-ranking officers who'd helped launder payments and erase evidence. Additional charges rippled outward, catching accomplices no one had suspected. At the sentencing, Nora and Ivy were invited to address the court. Nora's voice cracked as she described years of not knowing, holding on to hope that had bruised her more than grief itself. Ivy, clutching her father's work jacket, spoke only 4 words. He was my hero. Dent was sentenced to life without parole. The police department underwent a reckoning. Memorials bloomed outside Maddox's son's paper flowers, photos, silent tributes for a man whose life had become a lesson in grief and justice. As the seasons changed and Grantham thawed, Nora started to breathe again. She managed, slowly, to turn the shop into a community haven in Silas's honor, its walls adorned with images of better days, and Ivy grew, bearing both the weight and the light of her father's memory. The wind off Lake Maddox carried a gentle warmth by midsummer, finally chasing off the ghosts of a too-long winter. The vacant lot that had once echoed with the clang of tools and Silas Maddox's laughter was alive again, not as an auto shop, but as the Maddox Community Workshop, a place for neighbors to gather, learn, and rebuild what had been broken. On the first anniversary of Silas's discovery, the town gathered for a memorial. Banners in his honor rippled between the lampposts. Old friends and strangers alike milled together, voices hushed in respect. Detective Reyes stood at the edge, hands in her pockets, watching as Ivy Maddox, now taller, her gaze both solemn and hopeful, unveiled a mural of her father. The art was bold, every stroke capturing the memory of a man who refused to be just another tragedy. Nora stepped up, her words drifting over the crowd. We lost more than a brother, a father, or a friend. We lost our sense of safety, and for a time, our faith in each other. Today we find something new. Today, we reclaim hope. There was silence, and then applause. Ivy was the last to speak, her voice steady. My dad taught me to fix things, cars, broken toys, sometimes even people. He would say, you keep turning the wrench until it fits, and if it's stubborn, you don't give up. You ask for help, and you try again. That's what we did. That's what we'll keep doing. As the sun lowered, the workshop filled up. A teacher led children through their first basic repairs. Retired mechanics volunteered in memory of lost friends, and neighbors lingered far into the evening, drawn together by a story that was no longer only about loss, but about resilience. Detective Reyes, on her way home, paused once more at the shrine of flowers and letters by the main door. For a long moment, she stood in the hush, hearing not only the city's regrets, but its promise to never forget. She let herself smile, just once. The mystery of Silas Maddox's disappearance was over, but the story of a family and a town learning to forge trust and compassion from the shards of betrayal was only just beginning.